Let them land. Let them believe they can win. Then close the box and kill every last one of them slowly. The enemy commander lowered his radio and smiled at the burning wreck of the American helicopter. He wanted them to feel hope first. That was the cruelty of it. 8 of the finest men in the United States military had just been lured into a valley built to be their grave, and not one of them knew it yet. 46 guns were already closing in on 8. The trap was perfect. There was only one thing the commander hadn't counted on, one thing no plan could account for: watching silently from the western ridge. Before we go further, subscribe to the channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and comment the name of the city you are watching from right now, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Harris had trained his entire life for the moment when everything went wrong, and he still was not ready for the sound the helicopter made when it died. It was not a movie sound. It was not an explosion followed by silence. It was a scream of tearing metal, a shudder that ran through every bone in his body, and then the sickening tilt of the whole world rolling sideways as the bird lost its tail and started to spin. "Brace, brace, brace," the pilot was shouting, and Harris grabbed the man next to him, Petty Officer Ryan Porter, by the vest and pulled him down. "Stay tucked, kid," Harris said into his ear. "Whatever happens, you stay tucked and you hold on." "Copy, sir," Porter said, and his voice cracked on the second word, and Harris hated that he noticed it. Then the ground came up to meet them. The impact did not knock Harris out. He wished it had. He felt every second of it, the way the frame crumpled, the way his teeth slammed together, the way the whole cabin became a blender of gear and men and dust. And then somehow it stopped, and he was hanging sideways in his harness with blood in his mouth and a ringing in his ears so loud it felt like a hand pressed flat against his skull. "Sound off," Harris said. His own voice sounded far away. "I need everybody to sound off right now." Reyes up. "Coleman up. Diaz, I'm good. Novak up, but my leg is jammed. Give me a second." Porter, a pause. "Porter is up, sir." "Where's Whitfield?" Harris said. "Whitfield, sound off." Nothing. "Whitfield." "He's gone, sir." That was Diaz, close to Harris now, his hands already working the harness release. Chief took it on impact. "He's gone." Harris closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. 1 second was all he allowed himself. Chief Petty Officer Sam Whitfield had 2 daughters and a wife who baked the best cornbread Harris had ever eaten in his life, and there was going to be time to grieve that, but that time was not now. Now there were 7 men who could still breathe, and Harris intended to keep it that way. "Everybody out of the bird," Harris said. "Grab weapons, grab ammo, grab water, leave everything else. We are not staying with this wreck. Move." They came out of the helicopter into a wall of noise. It hit them all at once, the way the water hits you when you jump off a high dive, a sudden total pressure that made no sense. Machine gun fire from the north, machine gun fire from the east. The distinct heavy cough of a mortar tube somewhere up in the rocks, and then the whistle, and then the crump of the round landing, 40 yards behind them, close enough that the pressure wave shoved Harris in the back like an angry man in a crowd. "Cover, cover, get to the rocks," Harris shouted, and the team moved the way they were built to move fast and low, and together, no wasted motion. There was a crevice in the western rock face, a narrow slot maybe 20 feet deep, and Harris pushed his men into it one at a time, counting them as they passed. Reyes, Coleman, Diaz, Novak limping. Porter was moving wrong, favoring his left side, but he was moving. Then Harris himself, last man and back to the enemy, the way he had always been trained. Inside the crevice, pressed shoulder to shoulder with his men, Harris finally let himself breathe and think. "Comms tiktal," he said. "Reyes, get me comms. I need to reach the ship. I need air. I need a QRF. I need everybody." Reyes was already working the radio, his jaws tight, his thumb pressing the transmit button over and over. "Overlord, Overlord, this is Bravo 9. We are down. Troops in contact, request immediate air support, over." Static. "Overlord Bravo 9, do you copy, over?" Static. "Sir." Reyes looked up, and his eyes told Harris the answer before his mouth did. "We're jammed. This is not weather. This is not terrain. Somebody is actively jamming us. The whole band is white noise." And that was the moment Harris understood. He had been in bad spots before. He had been shot at, he had been outnumbered, he had lost men. But this was different, and the difference landed in his stomach like a stone dropped in a well. The helicopter had not been shot down by luck. The mortars had not found them by accident. The jamming was not a coincidence. Every single piece of this had been prepared in advance, laid out with patience, and set like a trap that snaps shut only when the animal is all the way inside. This was a setup, Harris said quietly, and he said it out loud because his men needed to hear it from him and not figure it out alone in the dark. There are no hostages, or if there are, they were bait. Somebody wanted us here in this exact valley with no way to call home, and now they've got us. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Coleman, who was the oldest man on the team after Harris, and had never once in 8 years shown fear, said the thing they were all thinking. "We're done for." "No," Harris said. "No, we are not done. You listen to me, all of you. We are not done until I say we're done, and I am not saying it. You hear me, Diaz?" "I hear you, sir." "Novak." "Copy, sir." "Porter," Harris turned to the youngest man in the crevice. "Porter, look at me. You hear me?" Porter did not answer. Porter was looking down at his own left side at the wet, dark stain spreading across the fabric there, and his face had gone the color of old paper. "I think I'm hit," Porter said, and he sounded almost apologetic about it. "Sir, I think I got hit, and I didn't feel it, and now I feel it." Harris was across the crevice and on his knees beside the kid before the sentence was even finished. "Diaz med kit now. Talk to me, Porter, stay with me. Where does it hurt?" "Everywhere," Porter breathed. "It's my side, sir. It went in my side." Diaz's hands were already cutting away the vest, already probing, already pulling out the pressure bandage, and his voice stayed flat and calm and professional in a way that Harris was grateful for because a scared medic could kill a man faster than a bullet. "Entry wound, left flank, no exit that I can find," Diaz reported. "He's bleeding, but it's not arterial. I can pack it. I can stabilize him. What I cannot do is get him on a bird because there is no bird." "Then we keep him alive right here until there is one," Harris said. "Porter, Ryan, look at me." The kid's eyes found his. "You are 23 years old, Theo," Harris said. "You are not dying in this hole today. That is an order. Are you going to disobey a direct order from your commanding officer?" And somehow impossibly, the kid laughed. It was a wet, broken little laugh, but it was a laugh. "No, sir. Wouldn't dream of it, sir." "Good man," Harris squeezed his shoulder. "Good man." Outside, the mortars kept walking closer. Harris crawled back to the mouth of the crevice and risked a look. What he saw made his mouth go dry. There were figures moving on the ridgelines, north and east, dozens of them moving with the confidence of men who knew they had already won. He counted and stopped counting at 30 because there was no point. 40, maybe more. Against 7, and one of the 7 was down. "Reyes," he said, sliding back into cover. "Give me a real number, ammo, everybody's load. I want to know exactly what we have." Reyes did the math out loud, quiet and fast. It was not a good number. It was the kind of number that told you a story with only one ending if you let it. "We hold this crevice," Harris said. "They have to funnel in to get to us. They can drop mortars on us all day, but eventually they have to come in on foot to finish it. And when they do that mouth right, there becomes a killing lane, and we own it. Every man picks his sector. Every man makes every round count. Nobody fires unless they have a target. We are going to make them pay for every single yard, and we are going to make it so expensive that maybe, just maybe, somebody upstairs decides we're worth coming to get." "And if nobody comes," Novak said. He was not being cowardly. He was being honest the way men are honest with each other when the pretending is over. Harris looked at him. "Then we make sure that when they write about this valley," Harris said, "they write that 8 American SEALs walked into a trap set by 40 men, and it still took the enemy 3 days and 100 bodies to walk out." Nobody cheered. This was not a movie. But something changed in the crevice all the same. A straightening of spines, a settling of hands on weapons. If they were going to die, they had decided together they were going to die like professionals, and they were going to make it mean something. The first assault came 20 minutes later. The enemy did exactly what Harris had predicted. They tried to rush the mouth of the crevice, a wave of maybe a dozen men screaming, firing from the hip, trusting numbers over skill. And the SEALs did what SEALs do. They did not panic. They did not spray. They picked their targets, and they squeezed, and the lead attackers folded into the dirt, and the rest of the wave broke and scattered back to cover, dragging their wounded. "Reset," Harris called. "Reload. Nobody chases, nobody exposes, they'll come again. They came again 40 minutes later, smarter this time, using smoke, using suppressing fire, and it cost the SEALs their first serious wound of the defense when a round skipped off the rock and opened a gash across Coleman's scalp that turned his whole face into a red mask. He never stopped shooting. He just wiped his eyes with the back of his glove and kept picking targets. "You still with me, Coleman?" Harris shouted over the noise. "Head wounds bleed like crazy, sir," Coleman shouted back. "Looks worse than it is. I'm up, I'm up." But Harris was doing math again, in the back of his mind, the terrible, relentless math of a leader in a losing fight, and the math kept coming out the same way. They had held 2 assaults. They could not hold 20. Every round they fired was a round they would never get back. Every wound slowed them down. The enemy had time and numbers and mortars and a jammer, and the SEALs had a hole in the rock and each other, and that was all. "Sir," it was Porter from the back of the crevice, his voice thin. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Harris crawled back to him during the lull. "Ask me anything, kid." "Do you think it hurts?" Porter said. "At the end, do you think it hurts?" And Harris, who had lied to a lot of people in his life for a lot of good reasons, decided not to lie to this one. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'll tell you what I do know. It's not going to happen today. Because today, you and me, we're both getting out of this valley. I don't have proof, I just know it. And when you've done this as long as I have, sometimes you just know things. Now drink some water and stop asking me sad questions, that's an order." Porter almost smiled. "Copy, sir." The third assault was the worst. This time the enemy did not just rush. This time they coordinated. Mortar fire dropped right on the mouth of the crevice, forcing the SEALs to duck deep. And in that window of ducking, the assault teams closed the distance. And when the SEALs came back up, there were attackers already at 15 yards, already inside the killing lane, and the fight became a close and ugly and personal thing. Diaz took a round through the meat of his shoulder and kept fighting one-handed. Reyes went through half his remaining ammunition in 90 seconds. Novak, his legs still bad from the crash, could barely shift his firing position, and an attacker almost flanked him before Coleman, blood still in his eyes, cut the man down at 10 feet. They held. Barely. They held. But when it was over and the enemy had pulled back yet again, Harris looked around the crevice at his men, and he did not see 7 operators anymore. He saw a collection of wounds held together by discipline. Coleman's face was a red mask. Diaz's arm hung useless. Novak could not move. Porter was fading. Reyes was almost out of ammunition. Only Harris himself was still whole, and he had maybe 2 magazines left. "Sir," Reyes said quietly, and he did not need to finish the sentence. "I know," Harris said. "The next one," Reyes said. "The next one we don't hold." "I know," Harris said again. He crawled to the center of the crevice so he could see all of them at once. He was their commander. This was the part of the job nobody talks about at the recruiting office, the part where you have to look your men in the eye and tell them the truth about the end. "Listen to me," Harris said. "All of you. I need to say some things, and I need you to let me say them." They quieted. Even the wounded turned toward his voice. "I have served with a lot of men in a lot of places," Harris said, "and I want you to know that there is not a single team in the entire United States Navy that I would rather be standing next to right now than the 6 of you. I mean that. I have never meant anything more in my life." "Sir," Novak started. "Let me finish," Harris said. "When they come again, we hold as long as we can. And if it goes the way the math says it goes, then I want every one of you to know that you did not fail. Do you hear me? You did not fail. You were sent into a trap with a lay, and you fought like lions, and no one could have done more. Whatever happens next is on the men who sent us here, not on us. Say it back to me, Porter. Whose fault is this?" "Not ours, sir," Porter breathed. "Not ours," Harris repeated, looking at each of them in turn. "Not ours." Outside, he could hear the enemy massing for what he was certain would be the final push. He could hear commanders calling out, organizing, and this time there was no urgency in their voices, only the patient confidence of men closing in for the kill. The mortar tube coughed again. The round whistled. It landed close enough that the whole crevice filled with dust, and Harris tasted grit and blood. He reloaded his second-to-last magazine. He looked at the mouth of the crevice. He waited. "Here they come," Coleman said. And then something happened that none of them, not in 1,000 years of training, could have predicted. One of the enemy gunners, a man up on the northern ridge behind a heavy machine gun, a man who was hundreds of yards away and completely safe, completely out of the fight, completely untouchable, simply dropped. He did not stagger. He did not cry out. One instant he was leaning into his gun, raking the crevice with fire. In the next instant, he folded straight down behind his weapon like a puppet whose strings had been cut, and the gun went silent. Harris blinked. "What?" Reyes said. "What was that?" "Did somebody hit him?" Coleman said. "Who hit him? Nobody can reach that far." Harris had heard no shot. That was the thing that made the hair stand up on the back of his neck. In all the noise of the battle, there had been no crack, no report. Nothing to mark the death of that gunner except the sudden silence of his gun. Whoever had made that shot had made it from so far away that the sound had not even reached the valley yet. "Nobody move," Harris said softly. "Nobody fire. Just watch." For a few seconds, nothing. Then a second enemy fighter dropped. A squad leader, this one, a man who had been standing and pointing and directing the assault, a man in the middle of a cluster of his own soldiers. He fell without a sound, and this time the other fighters around him saw it happen, saw him simply crumple, and Harris watched them react. He watched confusion ripple through them. He watched them look around, look up, look everywhere, trying to understand where the death had come from. And then a full second later, the sound finally arrived. A single flat crack rolling down from somewhere high on the western ridge, so distant that by the time the sound reached the valley, the man it had killed had already been dead for a full heartbeat. "That's outgoing," Reyes whispered. "That's not the enemy. That's a rifle. That's a rifle shooting at them." "From the west," Harris said. His heart was pounding now, but not with fear. "That shot came from the western ridge. Somebody is up there. Somebody is on our side, and they are up there, and they are reaching out and touching these men from a distance that should not be possible." A third shot, a fourth, each one perfectly spaced, unhurried, controlled, each one arriving with that same eerie delay, the death coming first and the sound coming after, and each one taking down not a random target, but a chosen one. A gunner, a leader, a man carrying extra ammunition. Whoever was up on that ridge was not just shooting. They were reading the entire battlefield, picking out the exact men whose deaths would hurt the enemy the most, and removing them one by one with a patience and a precision that Harris had never in his career witnessed. "They're panicking," Coleman said, and there was wonder in his voice. "Sir, look, the enemy is panicking. They don't know where it's coming from." He was right. The assault that had been forming the final push meant to overrun the crevice was falling apart before it even started. The enemy fighters were no longer looking at the SEALs. They were looking at the ridges, at the sky, at each other, and Harris could see the fear spreading through them like a crack spreading through glass, because there is no fear on a battlefield worse than dying to an enemy you cannot see. "Sir," Reyes said suddenly. "Sir, the radio. Listen, the radio." The jamming was still there, that white wall of static, but underneath it, now faint and then stronger. Cutting through was a voice. A woman's voice. It was calm. It was almost gentle. It carried no fear at all, no strain, none of the tension that lived in every other voice in that valley. It was the voice of someone doing a job she had done 1,000 times, someone for whom this chaos was simply a Tuesday, and it came through the static clear and steady and absolutely in control. "Bravo 9, the voice said. "Bravo 9, if you can hear me, do not respond. Do not key your mic. Just listen." Harris grabbed the handset and held it and did exactly as she said. He did not speak. He listened. "I have eyes on your position," the voice continued. "I have eyes on all of you. I know you have wounded. I know you are low on ammunition. I know what your math looks like. I want you to forget your math. Your math is wrong now because I am on your net and I am not going anywhere." Coleman was staring at the radio. Diaz, holding his ruined shoulder, was staring at the radio. Even Porter, pale and fading in the back of the crevice, had lifted his head. "Who is that?" Novak breathed. "Sir, who is that?" Harris did not answer because he did not know. He only knew that a moment ago he had been reciting last words to his men, and now a ghost on a ridge was rewriting the entire battle, and a calm woman's voice was telling him his death was canceled. "Here is what is going to happen," and the voice said. "You are going to do exactly what I tell you when I tell you, and I am going to walk you out of that valley. I have been watching your enemy for a long time. I know their positions better than they do. I know where their reinforcements are staged. I know where the gaps are. And in about 90 seconds, I am going to make you a door where there is currently a wall. When I do, you are going to move fast and you are going to trust me, even though you have no reason to. Do you understand me, Bravo 9? Do not respond. Just get ready. Harris looked around the crevice at these men he had already in his heart said goodbye to, and he felt something rising in his chest that he had thought was gone for good. Hope. You heard the lady, he said, and his voice was rough. On your feet. Anybody who can move, help somebody who can't. Diaz, you carry the ammo. I've got Porter. We are getting out of this hole. We are going home. Every single one of us. Coleman, whose fault was this? Coleman grinned through the blood on his face. Not ours, sir. Not ours, Harris said, and it's not going to be our funeral either. Not today. Get ready to move. Out on the ridges, the enemy was still dying, one calm and perfect shot at a time, and the sound of each death rolled down into the valley a full second late like thunder chasing lightning. And somewhere on the western high ground, a woman whose name Harris did not yet know, whose face he had never seen, whose existence was about to turn everything he thought he understood about that day. Upside down, settled her cheek against her rifle, exhaled slowly, and reached out across an impossible distance to save the lives of 7 men she had never met. Harris keyed the mic. He knew she had told him not to. He did it anyway because there were some things a man had to say. I don't know who you are, he said quietly into the static, but if we live, I am going to find out, and I am going to owe you everything. For a moment, there was only the white noise. Then the calm voice came back, and for the first time it had carried the faintest edge of something almost like warmth. Save it, she said. You are not out yet. Now move. Now move was easier said than done, and the woman on the ridge seemed to know it, because before Harris could even give the order, she was already back on the net, her voice steady as a metronome. Bravo 9, do not go out the way you came in. I know that is your instinct. I know that mouth of rock feels like your only door. It is not. It is a trap inside a trap. They have 2 gunners waiting on that lane right now, hoping you'll panic and run for it. So you are not going to run for it. You are going to trust me instead. Harris keyed the mic once a single click, the old signal for understood. Good, she said. You learned fast. Here's the truth of your situation, and I am only going to say it once. There are 41 of them left down from 46 a few minutes ago. And yes, those 5 are on me. There will be more on me soon. To your north is their main body. To your east is a support element with the mortar. And to your south, about 60 meters, there is a dry channel cut into the rock low enough that a crawling man cannot be seen from the ridgelines. That channel is your road home, but you cannot reach it yet because right now there are 3 fighters sitting on the lip of it, and if you move, they will see you. So we are going to fix that first. How whoa, Harris breathed not into the mic, just to himself. As if she had heard him anyway, that flat, distant crack rolled down from the western high ground. 1. A pause of maybe 2 seconds. 2. Another pause. 3. The channel is clear, the woman said. You have a road now. Move your wounded first. Move them low and move them now. You have a 90-second window before their squad leaders notice those 3 are quiet. 90 seconds, Bravo 9. I am counting them for you. Harris did not waste a single one of them. Diaz, Novak, you're first. Take the ammo and go south, channel low as you can get. Coleman clears the way, he barked, already sliding an arm under Porter. Reyes, you're on my 6. Nobody stands up. Nobody. If your belly isn't dragging the dirt, you're too high. Move, move, move. Novak went first, dragging his bad leg, teeth clenched so hard Harris could hear them grinding, and Diaz went right behind him with the ammo cans and only one working arm, and Coleman crawled ahead of both of them with his rifle up and blood still sheeting down his face, and Harris got Porter up onto his shoulder in a fireman's carry and felt the kid go rigid with pain and heard him swallow the scream. I got you, Ryan, Harris said. I got you. Don't you make a sound. Bite down and don't you make a sound. Not making a sound, sir, Porter whispered, and then he made a sound anyway, a thin, high whine through his teeth, and Harris just moved faster. They flowed out of the crevice and into the dry channel like water finding a crack. And for the first 30 seconds, it worked exactly the way the woman said it would. The channel was deep enough. The enemy on the ridges was looking the wrong way, still hunting for the phantom shooter, still dying in 1s and 2s to that patient rifle. Harris counted his men into the channel one by one, and for one bright shining moment, he let himself believe it was going to be easy. It was not going to be easy. Bravo 9, stop! The woman's voice snapped tight for the first time. Stop moving! Freeze! Do not breathe! Harris froze with Porter's dead weight crushing down on his shoulder, and his own knees screaming and his heart hammering against his ribs. There is a two-man patrol coming down the channel toward you from the south, she said, and now every word was clipped and fast. They do not know you are here. They are just walking their route. They will be on top of your lead man in about 15 seconds. I cannot take both of them cleanly from this angle. The rock is in my way. Coleman, you are the lead man. Do you have a knife? Wow. Coleman, who could not hear her, looked back at Harris, and Harris related in a voice barely louder than a breath. Two hostiles coming at you close. She can't shoot them. You have to do it quiet. Knife, now. Coleman's bloody face went still. He nodded once. He set his rifle down in the dirt with the care of a man setting down a sleeping child, and he drew his blade, and he pressed himself into the shadow of the channel wall, and he waited, and Harris watched the older man become something very old and very patient, a predator in a hole in the ground. The seconds stretched out into something almost unbearable. Harris could hear the two enemy fighters now, could hear their footsteps in their low, easy conversation. Two men with no idea that they had walked into the last 15 seconds of their lives. He could feel Porter shaking against his shoulder. He could feel Reyes behind him, breath held. Nobody moved. Nobody could move. Nobody could. The first fighter came around the bend in the channel, and Coleman took him so fast and so silently that the man was on the ground before his partner even registered that anything had happened. And then Coleman was on the second one, and there was a brief, terrible struggle, boots scraping a grunt, and then stillness. Clear, Coleman breathed, and he sagged back against the wall, shaking, wiping his blade on his trousers, and for a second the toughest man on the team looked like he might be sick. Both hostiles down, the woman confirmed, as if she had watched the whole thing, which of course she had. That was clean work. Tell your knife man that was clean work. Now keep moving. Your window just got shorter. Somebody up north is going to miss that patrol soon. She says good work, Harris told Coleman. She says keep moving. Coleman picked his rifle back up. Tell her, he said hoarsely, that I'd like to buy her a drink. I'll pass it along, Harris said. Move. They moved. For 4 minutes they crawled and dragged and hauled themselves down that dry channel, and every 30 seconds or so, the flat crack of the woman's rifle rolled down from the ridge, and every shot meant one less enemy who might turn around and see them. Harris lost track of how many times she fired. He only knew that a battle which should have already killed them all was somehow still not killing them. And the only thing standing between his team and 41 enemy fighters was a voice on the radio and a rifle he could not see. And then the voice changed again. Bravo 9, we have a problem. She said it evenly, but Harris had been listening to her long enough now to hear the thing underneath the evenness. Their commander finally figured out what I am. Up until now, he thought he had one lucky sniper harassing his flank. He just realized he has an Overwatch element that is systematically dismantling his entire assault, and he is smart, and he just did the smart thing. He is pulling a 6-man team off the line and sending them west, up the ridge, toward me. Harris stopped crawling. Say again, he said into the mic, breaking his own silence because he had to. Say again, are they coming for you? They are coming for me, she said, and there was no fear in it, just fact. 6 of them, trained, moving well. It will take them about 8 minutes to reach my elevation. In 8 minutes, I am either going to be very busy or I am going to be off this net. Either way, this is the part where I stop being able to hold your hand. So you need to hear the rest of your route right now while I can still give it to you, and then you need to be prepared to finish this on your own. Negative, Harris said, and he surprised himself with the force of it. Negative. We are not leaving you up there alone with 6 shooters climbing your hill. We can turn, we can come to you, we can lay down fire on that ridge and take the heat off. No, she said, and it was the first time she had raised her voice, and it cracked across the net like a slap. Absolutely not. Listen to me, Commander, because I am only going to explain myself one time. You have 7 men. One of them is carrying a bullet in his flank. One of them can't use an arm. One of them can't walk right. If you turn your broken team around and try to climb an open ridge to reach me, you will lose all of them, and I will have wasted every single one of these shots. I did not spend the last 20 minutes keeping you alive so you could throw it away being a hero. You have a job. Your job is those hostages and getting your men home. My job is this ridge. Let me do my job. Harris pressed his forehead against the cold rock of the channel wall and said nothing for a moment because she was right, and because he hated that she was right, and because in all his years he had never once been the man who was told to keep running while somebody else stayed behind to hold the door. How do you know all this? He said finally quietly. The route, their positions, the gaps. You know this valley like you built it. Who are you? That is not a question you get answered today, she said. Maybe not ever. Focus, Commander. Here is the rest of your route, and you are going to memorize it because I need my hands for other things now. And she gave it to him fast and precise, turn by turn, distance by distance. The channel would take them another 200 meters south, she said, to a place where it opened into a wash. They were not to enter the wash. Instead, they would find a goat trail on the eastern wall, a trail so faint most men would walk right past it, and they would take that trail up and over a low saddle, and on the far side of that saddle out of the valley, entirely out of the kill box, was a shepherd's structure. And in that structure, she said, and here her voice did something strange, was the thing that was going to change everything. There are 3 American hostages in that structure, she said. They are alive. They are guarded by 4 men. The hostages were never in the valley, Commander. The valley was the trap. The hostages were the reason you were willing to walk into it. They have been sitting in that shepherd's hut the whole time 90 seconds from where your bird went down, while the enemy hoped you'd die in the crevice, never knowing how close you were. The words hit Harris harder than any mortar had. They're alive, he repeated. The hostages are alive, and they're right there. 90 seconds from your position when you clear that saddle, she said. 4 guards. You have 7 men and even broken 7 seals against 4 guards who don't know you're coming is a fight you win. You did not fail your mission, Commander. Your mission is still there. Go finish it. Harris felt something crack open in his chest, something between a foe and a war cry, and he pushed it down and turned it into fuel. You hear that? He said, turning to his men, and he did not bother to whisper anymore because the time for whispering was ending. The hostages are alive. They're over that saddle. This was never a suicide run. We came here to bring 3 Americans home, and by God, we are still going to bring 3 Americans home. On me, we move. Sir, Reyes said, what about her? The shooter. She's got 6 coming up her hill. Harris looked at the radio in his hand. He looked at the western ridge that he could not see past the walls of the channel. He thought about a woman he had never met settling in alone to face 6 trained fighters so that 7 strangers could live. She's giving us the door, he said, and his voice was rough. The least we can do is walk through it fast enough to be worth it. Move, Reyes, that's an order. Move. They moved. The next 4 minutes were a blur of pain and effort and the constant flat cracking of the woman's rifle behind and above them. And Harris tried not to count the shots, tried not to do the terrible math of how much longer she could last, and failed, because that was who he was. He carried Porter up the faint goat trail she had promised would be there, and it was there exactly where she said. And that small proof of her reliability meant more to him than he could have explained, because it meant that everything else she had told him was probably true too, and that meant there really were 3 living Americans waiting on the far side of the saddle. Talk to me, Porter. Harris grunted as he climbed. Stay awake. Talk to me. I'm here, sir, Porter mumbled against his back. I'm here. Sir, can I ask you something? You and your questions. Ask me. Is she real? Porter said, and his voice was dreamy with blood loss and shock. The lady on the radio. Is she real, or am I dying and imagining her? She's real, Harris said. She's the realest thing in this whole valley, and she's not going to let you die. So don't you dare embarrass her by doing it anyway. Copy, sir, Porter whispered. Wouldn't dream of it. Behind them up on the ridge, the rhythm of the rifle changed. Harris noticed it the way you notice a heartbeat changing under your hand. The shots had been slow, spaced, unhurried, the shooting of a woman with all the time in the world and 40 targets to choose from. Now they came faster. Now they came in tight, urgent pairs, and there were pauses between them that were the wrong-shaped pauses where she was moving, repositioning, and Harris understood, without being told, that the 6 men had reached her elevation and the hunt on the ridge had begun. Bravo 9. Her voice came back on the net, and for the first time it was not perfectly calm. It was fast and it was tight, and underneath it, Harris could hear her breathing hard. I am displacing. They are close. If I go quiet, do not come back for me. Do you understand? Do not come back. You finish your mission. That is the only thing that makes any of this mean anything. Say you understand. I understand, Harris said, and it was the hardest thing he had said all day. But I'm not saying goodbye. You hear me? I am not saying goodbye to a woman I've never met. So don't you die. There, that's not an order. I don't have the right to order you anything. It's a request from one operator to another. Don't you die up there. There was a pause, then a short, breathless sound that might have been a laugh. I'll do my best, she said. Now clear that saddle, Commander, and Harris. She used his name for the first time, and he had never told it to her, and the fact that she knew it sent a chill straight down his spine. When you go into that hut, the guard on the north corner is the fast one. Take him first. And then the net went to static, and she was gone. Sir, Reyes said, staring at the radio. Sir, she knew your name. You never said your name. How did she know your name? I don't know, Harris said. And he didn't. And it terrified him and it comforted him both at once, because whoever she was operating on a level so far above the chaos of this valley that she had known his name before he ever climbed off that helicopter. And that meant this was not luck. And that meant she had chosen them, and a person does not choose to save strangers unless something in them refuses to let good men die. They reached the top of the saddle. Harris set Porter down as gently as he could in the cover of the ridgeline and got his first look at the far side, and there it was exactly as she had promised. A low stone structure, a shepherd's hut maybe 40 yards down the slope, and Harris could see the guards and he counted them, and there were 4, exactly 4, and one of them was standing at the north corner, exactly where she had said the fast one would be. Every single thing she had told him had been true. Coleman Reyes on me, Harris breathed. Diaz, you stay with Porter and Novak. You're our rear security. Anything comes over that saddle behind us, you drop it, Coleman. You and me take the 2 on the near wall. Reyes, the north corner is yours, and Reyes, listen to me. That one is fast, so you don't miss. You understand you do not miss that shot. On my mark. We do this clean and we do this quiet as long as we can. And the second it goes loud, we go through that door and we do not stop until every guard is down and every hostage is behind us. Everybody clear. Clear, sir, came back 3 times. Harris took a breath. He thought absurdly of Whitfield back in the wreck of the helicopter, who would never see how this ended. He thought of Whitfield's cornbread and Whitfield's daughters. He thought that if there was any justice in the world, this was where the day started paying them back for everything it had taken. Mark, he whispered. It went loud almost immediately because that is how these things go, and the next 90 seconds were the fastest and most brutal of the entire day. Reyes took the fast one at the north corner with a single shot, and the man went down before he could raise his weapon, and Coleman dropped one of the near guards, and Harris dropped the other in the fourth guard. The last one got a burst off into the dark that hit nothing, before Coleman put him down too, and then Harris was moving. Sprinting the last 20 yards to the hut, and he hit the door with his shoulder and went through it with his rifle up and his heart in his throat. And there they were, 3 Americans, a man and 2 women aid workers by the look of them, filthy and gaunt and bound at the wrists and blinking in terror at the armed figure who had just burst through their door, and for one awful second they did not understand. And then the man saw the flag on Harris's shoulder, and something broke open in his face. United States Navy, Harris said, and his voice cracked, and he did not care. We're Americans. We're here to take you home. You're safe, you hear me? You're safe now. One of the women started to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs, and the man just kept saying thank you, thank you, thank you over and over, and Harris was already cutting their bindings, and Coleman and Reyes were flooding in behind him, and for one moment, one single golden moment, in the middle of the worst day of all their lives, everything was going to be all right. Bravo 9, this is Bravo 9, we have the packages. I say again, we have the packages, all 3, alive and mobile, Harris said into the radio. And to his shock, the jamming was gone, the net was clear, and a voice came back, a real voice, an American voice from a command element that had spent the last hour believing Bravo 9 was already dead. Bravo 9, this is Overlord. Say again, we read you have all 3 packages. Overlord, that is affirmative. All three American hostages recovered alive. We have wounded. We need immediate exfil grid to follow, Harris said, and he heard the disbelief in the operator's voice. And he understood it because 30 minutes ago he would not have believed it either. Bravo 9 Overlord understood. Exfil is inbound. Be advised, your comms were jammed. For the last 62 minutes, we lost you completely. We had you listed as standby. A pause. Bravo 9, be advised, we had no assets in your area of operations. I say again, we had no friendly assets anywhere near your position. Whatever happened out there, it did not come from us. Harris went very still. Say again, Overlord. I say again. Bravo 9, there were no friendly forces assigned to your operation beyond your own team. No air, no overwatch, no support element. You were the only Americans in that valley. And Harris looked around at his surviving men, at the freed hostages, at the radio in his hand, and he thought about the calm voice and the impossible shots and the woman who had known his name, and a cold understanding settled over him. Whoever she was not on any list. She was not on any roster. According to the entire United States military, she did not exist. And she had just spent the last hour dying by inches on a ridge to save men that her own command structure did not even know were in trouble. Overlord, Harris said slowly, I have reason to believe there is a friendly sniper element operating on the western ridge of this valley. A woman, she is the only reason my team is alive. She engaged and eliminated a significant portion of the enemy force, and she is currently under attack by a 6-man team that broke off to hunt her. I am formally requesting that exfil assets be tasked to recover her. There was a long pause on the net. Bravo 9, Overlord said finally, and the operator's voice had changed, gone careful, gone quiet. There is no friendly sniper element in your area. There is no woman. I have no record of any such asset. I am advising you to disregard and focus on your own exfil. Overlord, I am telling you what I saw, Harris said, and his voice was rising now. I am telling you she is real. She saved 7 American lives, and she is up on that ridge right now fighting for hers. Somebody knows who she is. Somebody sent her. And I am not leaving this valley until we get her off that hill. Bravo 9, a different voice now. Older, colder, a voice used to being obeyed. This is Overlord Actual. You will focus on your wounded and your packages and your own exfil. There is no sniper. Is that understood? And in the way the man said it, in the flat finality of it, Harris understood something that made his blood run cold. Overlord Actual was not confused. Overlord Actual was not telling him there was no sniper because he didn't know about one. Overlord Actual was telling him there was no sniper because there could not officially be one. Because whoever she was, whatever she was part of, it was the kind of thing that men in command centers said did not exist, even when it was the only reason their people came home. There she is, Reyes said suddenly from the doorway, and Harris turned. Reyes was staring back up at the saddle at the ridge beyond it, and Harris followed his gaze, and for one instant, one single instant, he saw movement on the western high ground. A figure, small with distance, moving fast along the ridgeline, and behind that figure, muzzle flashes the 6-man team firing, and the figure firing back over her shoulder as she ran, and Harris watched her make an impossible leap across a gap in the rocks and roll and come back up, still moving, still fighting, still alive. She's alive, Harris breathed. Coleman, she's still alive. She's still up there. And then the enemy fire found her. Harris saw her stumble. He saw the figure on the ridge lurch sideways, saw her go down onto one knee, and for a horrible second, he thought that was it. That was the end, and then she came back up slower now, dragging one leg, and she turned to face the 6 men closing in on her, and she raised her rifle one more time. No, Harris said. No, no, no. He was already moving toward the door, already forgetting every order he'd been given, already deciding that whatever Overlord Actual said, he was going up that ridge, and Coleman grabbed his arm. Sir, our exfil is inbound. We've got 3 hostages and 4 wounded. If you go up that hill, you're taking men who can't afford to lose you. She told you not to come back. She told you. I'm not leaving her, Coleman. Sir, look. And Harris looked, and what he saw on the ridge stopped his heart. The woman had stopped running. She had planted herself in the open, in full view, wounded, and she had done it on purpose, and Harris understood why in the same instant that it happened. She had drawn all 6 of them into a tight cluster by making herself the bait, by making herself irresistible. A wounded sniper, alone in the open. And the 6 men had taken the bait and bunched up to finish her. And that was the mistake she had been waiting for. And in the last second before they cut her down, she pulled something from her vest and threw it into their midst. The explosion rolled across the valley a full second after the flash, the way all sound had done all day long, late and distant and final. And when the smoke cleared, the 6 men were gone, and the figure on the ridge was down, flat on her back, unmoving. "She got them," Reyes whispered. "Sir, she got all 6 of them. But she's down. She's not moving. Sir, she's not moving." For a long, terrible moment, nobody in the shepherd's hut said anything at all. The 2 women hostages were staring up at the ridge. The male hostage had gone silent. Porter, drifting in and out on the floor, lifted his head and asked in the small voice of a hurt child whether the lady on the radio was okay. Harris did not answer him because Harris did not know, and because the exfil helicopters were finally cutting through the dark toward them, their rotors beating the air, and because he was the commander, and the commander had 4 wounded men and 3 rescued civilians who needed him right now in this moment alive, and he could not be in 2 places at once, no matter how much his heart was trying to climb that ridge. "Diaz," he said, and his voice came out strangled. "Get the hostages ready to move." Coleman marked the LZ Reyes. He grabbed Reyes by the vest. "Reyes, I need you to keep your eyes on that ridge. On her. Do not look away. If she moves, if she so much as twitches a finger, you tell me. You do not blink. You understand me. You keep her in your sight." "Yes, sir," Reyes said, and he lifted his rifle and put his eye to the scope and aimed it up at the fallen figure on the western ridge, and he did not blink. The helicopters came in fast and low, and the team loaded the hostages first, then the wounded Novak and Diaz and Coleman, and finally Porter and Harris supervised every second of it with half his attention, while the other half stayed locked on the ridge on Reyes, on the figure that had not moved. "Anything," he shouted over the rotors. "Reyes, anything." "Nothing, sir," Reyes shouted back. "She's not moving. But, sir, I don't see anybody else up there either. The enemy's broken. Whatever she did, she broke them. The valley's clearing out." Harris made a decision then that he knew would follow him for the rest of his life, and he made it in about 2 seconds, which was all the time he had. "You," he said, grabbing the nearest crew chief. "That ridge, west. There's a friendly down up there. 1 person. I need you to put me and 1 other man up on that saddle before we leave this valley." The crew chief shook his head. "Sir, I've got no manifest for anybody on that ridge. My orders are packages and wounded only. Command says there's nobody up there." "Command is wrong," Harris said, and there was something in his voice now that made the crew chief go quiet. "I watched her save every life on this bird. I am not leaving her body on that hill for the enemy to find, and if she's alive, I am not leaving her at all. Now you can fly me to that saddle, or you can watch me climb it on foot, but either way, I am not leaving this valley without her. Your call, Chief. Make it fast." The crew chief looked at him for a long moment. Then he keyed his own mic and spoke to the pilot, and the helicopter's nose swung toward the western ridge, and Harris grabbed Coleman, who was the only one of his wounded who could still fight, and said, "You're with me. We go up, we grab her, we come back. 90 seconds. Can you do 90 seconds? Coleman, with his face still caked in dried blood, checked his rifle and nodded. "For her, I'll do it on 1 leg. Let's go get our ghost, sir." The bird flared over the saddle, and Harris and Coleman jumped the last few feet and hit the ground running, and they crested the ridge, and there she was. She was lying on her back among the rocks, her rifle still clutched in 1 hand, and she was covered in blood, her own and others, and for 1 gut-wrenching second, Harris was certain she was dead. Her eyes were closed, her chest was still, and then as he dropped to his knees beside her and pressed 2 fingers to her throat, he felt it. Faint, thready, but there, a pulse in her iron. "She's alive!" Harris shouted. "Coleman, she's alive! Help me get her up, ma'am! Ma'am, can you hear me? We've got you. We came back. You hear me? We came back for you." And her eyes opened. Just barely, just a slit. And she looked up at the face of the man she had spent the last hour saving, the man whose name she had somehow already known. And her cracked lips moved, and Harris leaned down to hear her over the rotors, and what she said was not "thank you," and it was not "help me," and it was not any of the things a dying person is supposed to say. What she said, in a voice like dry leaves with the ghost of a smile on her bloodied face, was, I told you not to come back, Commander. And Harris, gathering her broken body up into his arms, felt tears cut through the dirt on his face, and he laughed a wet, shaking, joyful laugh. And he said, yeah, well, turns out I'm real bad at following orders from people who don't exist. Now, hold on. We're taking you home. Now, hold on turned out to be the easy part. Holding on was what she did. It was the rest of the world that could not seem to hold on to her. The helicopter lifted off the ridge with the woman cradled in Harris's arms, and the second they were airborne, the medic assigned to the exfil bird crawled across the deck to take her, and Harris watched the man's practiced hands go still for just a moment as he took in the full extent of what he was looking at. Sir, the medic said over the intercom. Who is this? She's not on my manifest. I've got 7 SEALs, 3 hostages, and I count 11 souls I'm supposed to have. She makes 12. Who is she? She's the reason there are 11 of us to count, Harris said. Work on her, ask questions later. Sir, I need a name. I need something for the trauma team on the ship, for the blood, for everything I need to tell them who's coming in. And Harris realized he did not have one. He had spent the last hour trusting his life and the lives of his men to a voice, and he did not know that voice's name. He leaned down close to her face. Her eyes had drifted shut again, and her breathing was shallow and wrong, and there was too much blood, too much of it soaking into the deck, and Harris felt a spike of pure animal fear that he had come all this way, climbed that ridge, against orders only to lose her in the back of a helicopter. Hey, he said. Hey, stay with me. I need your name. You know mine. Now I need yours. Come on, what's your name? Her lips moved. He put his ear right against them. Hayes, she breathed. Evelyn Hayes. Evelyn Hayes, Harris repeated loud enough for the medic to hear. Her name is Evelyn Hayes. You write that down. You put that in every record you've got. Evelyn Hayes, she was here. She was real. The medic keyed his radio and began relaying to the ship, and Harris heard the pause on the other end, heard the confusion, heard someone say the words no record, and someone else say again the name. And Harris felt his jaw tighten, because it was starting already, the erasing, the pretending, and she was not even off the aircraft yet. Commander. It was Coleman slumped against the bulkhead with his bloody face and his one good leg stretched out in front of him, and he was looking at Harris with an expression Harris had never seen on him before. Sir, I've been doing this 19 years. I've never seen shooting like that in my life. Not in training, not in theaters, not anywhere. The way she picked targets. The way she read the whole valley. That wasn't good, sir. That was something else. That was a level I didn't know existed. I know, Harris said. People don't just shoot like that, Coleman said. That's 10,000 hours. That's a lifetime. Somebody made her. Somebody spent years and a fortune making her into whatever that was. And command's telling you she doesn't exist. He shook his head slowly. Sir, what did we just walk into? Harris did not answer because he was watching Evelyn Hayes fight for her life on the deck of a helicopter that officially was not carrying her, and he did not have an answer, and it was starting to scare him more than the valley had. The flight to the ship took 26 minutes. Harris counted every one of them. Twice her heart stumbled, and twice the medic brought her back, and Harris held her hand through both of them. This stranger's hand, this hand that had reached across a mile of open air to keep 7 men breathing, and he found himself talking to her low and steady, the way he'd talked to Porter in the crevice. You don't get to quit now, he told her. You hear me? You held that ridge against 6 men. 6. You are not going to be beaten by a helicopter ride. That's ridiculous. That's an embarrassing way to go, and you know it. So you hold on. That's a request, not an order. I remember the rules. Hold on, Evelyn Hayes. When they landed on the ship, everything happened very fast, and then strangely, everything stopped. The trauma team was waiting, and they took her, and they ran her off the flight deck on a stretcher and through the hatches, and Harris ran alongside for as far as they would let him, and then a hand landed flat on his chest, and a corpsman said, "This is as far as you go, sir. Let us work." And the doors closed, and she was gone, and Harris stood in the passageway soaked in her blood and his own and Porter's, and for the first time in over an hour, he had nothing to do, and it nearly broke him. Coleman found him there 10 minutes later, cleaned up and bandaged, his scalp wound stitched. They've got Porter in surgery, Coleman said. Docs say he's going to make it. Bullet missed everything that matters by about half an inch. Kid's got the luck of the devil. He paused. Diaz Novak, they're both stable. Hostages are being checked out. They're dehydrated and beat up, but they're alive. We didn't lose anybody, sir, except Whitfield. We got everybody home except Whitfield. Harris nodded, and the grief for Whitfield sat in his chest right alongside the terror for Evelyn Hayes, and he carried both. And her, Harris said. What about her? Still in surgery, Coleman said. Sir, something's wrong. There are men here, not ours. I don't know whose. Suits one of them's a full-bird colonel I've never seen before, and they went straight into the surgical suite 10 minutes after she did. They're not doctors, sir, and nobody's letting anyone near that end of the ship. Harris was moving before Coleman finished the sentence. He got exactly as far as the second hatch before two men in plain clothes stepped into his path, and they did not touch him, and they did not raise their voices, but there was no getting past them, and everyone in the passageway knew it. Commander Harris, one of them said. It was not a question. You've had a long day. You should get yourself cleaned up and see the flight surgeon. I want to see her, Harris said. The woman who came in with us, Evelyn Hayes. I want to know if she's alive. There's no one here by that name, the man said, and he said it so smoothly, so pleasantly, that Harris almost admired it. You brought in your team and 3 recovered hostages. That's the whole story, Commander. That's a good story. That's a hero story. I'd hold on to it. And there it was again. The wall. The polite, immovable, bottomless wall of men whose entire job was to make sure that certain things had never happened. I held her hand while her heart stopped, Harris said quietly. Twice. I've got her blood on me right now. Don't stand there and tell me she doesn't exist. I'm not one of your reports you can just edit. The man studied him for a moment, and something almost like sympathy crossed his face. Get some rest, Commander, he said. That's not a suggestion. And he stepped back, and the hatch closed, and Harris was left standing in the passageway with his fists clenched and nowhere to put the rage. 12 hours passed. Harris did not sleep. He sat in the ready room and he waited, and men came and went, and the ship did what ships do, and every hour or so he got up and walked to that hatch at the end of the ship, and every hour or so the plainclothes men turned him around. He got updates on his own team, good ones. Porter came out of surgery and would recover. Diaz's shoulder was repaired, Novak's leg was set, the hostages were flown off to a hospital and presumably to their families, and Harris was glad of that, deeply glad, but it was a distant gladness because there was a woman 50 feet away behind a locked hatch, and no one would tell him whether she was alive or dead. At the 14-hour mark, a different man came for him. This one was older, wearing a uniform of captain, with the kind of tired eyes that come from a career of doing things that other people are not allowed to know about. He sat down across from Harris in the empty ready room, and he set down 2 cups of coffee, and he pushed one across the table. Commander Harris, he said, my name doesn't matter, so don't ask for it. I'm here to talk to you about what happened in that valley, and I'm going to tell you some things, and I'm telling you these things because you earned them, not because I'm supposed to. Do you understand the difference? I understand it, Harris said. Drink your coffee. You look like hell. Harris drank his coffee. The woman you brought off that ridge is alive, the captain said, and Harris felt the entire weight of the last 14 hours lift off his chest so suddenly that his hands started to shake. She flatlined a 3rd time on the table. They brought her back. She lost a tremendous amount of blood, and she'll be a long time healing, but she's going to live. I thought you should hear that from someone, because I know you've been sitting out here for half a day driving yourself sick over it. Thank you, Harris said, and his voice cracked, and he did not care. Now here's the hard part, the captain said, and I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything. Her name is Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes. She is 38 years old. She has been in the Navy for 16 years, and for the last 9 of them, she has not existed. She belongs to a unit that does not appear on any organizational chart, that has no budget line, that is not acknowledged in any classified briefing, above a circle of about 11 people, of which I am one. We call it Griffin Unit. You will not repeat that name. You will not write it down. You will forget I said it before you leave this room. Harris said nothing. He waited. Griffin Unit does observation, the captain continued. Deep observation, the kind that requires putting a single operator into a position for days or weeks at a time alone, watching things that the United States is not officially watching. They do not engage. That is the entire point of them. They are ghosts. They see everything and they touch nothing, because the moment they touch something, they stop being ghosts, and a ghost that isn't a ghost anymore is worthless to us and worse. It's a liability. He paused. Evelyn Hayes was in that valley on an observation assignment. She was watching the enemy commander, a man we have wanted eyes on for 2 years. She had strict, explicit, unambiguous orders. Observe. Do not engage. Under no circumstances, reveal your presence. And she had been holding that discipline perfectly for 11 days. Until we showed up, Harris said. Until you showed up, the captain agreed. She watched your helicopter get shot down. She watched the enemy spring the trap. She watched how 46 men close in on 8. And she watched your team get pinned in that crevice. And she was ordered. She was understanding orders to do nothing. To let it happen. To hold her cover no matter what she saw because her mission was worth more than any 8 men. That's the brutal arithmetic of what she does, Commander. She has watched Americans die before and held her position because those were the orders, because the bigger picture demanded it. That is the job. That is the terrible and human job we asked her to do. Harris felt sick. You're telling me she was ordered to watch us die. I'm telling you that's what her orders required, the captain said quietly. And I'm telling you that for 11 days, she was the perfect ghost, and then she watched a 23-year-old kid get shot in a hole in the rock, and something in her broke. She got on your net. She threw 9 years of discipline in an operation 2 years in the making off a cliff. And she picked up her rifle and she started shooting. She burned her cover. She burned the mission. She burned the entire operation. To save the lives of 7 men she had never met and was under orders to let die. The room was very quiet. Why, Harris said finally, why would she do that? Throw all of it away? The captain was silent for a long moment. Because 6 years ago, he said, on a different ridge in a different country, Evelyn Hayes watched her own teammate get pinned down and killed while she held her position under orders. She had the shot. She had the shot that would have saved him, and her orders said, hold, do not reveal your presence. The mission comes first, and she held. And she watched him die. And she has carried that every single day for 6 years. He looked at Harris. When she saw your kid go down in that crevice, I don't think she was in your valley anymore. I think she was back on that other ridge. And I think this time she decided she would rather burn down the whole world than hold her position and watch it happen again. Harris put his face in his hands. She saved us, he said muffled. She saved all of us because she couldn't save him. She saved all of you, the captain agreed. And now here is where it gets complicated, and here is the real reason I'm sitting across from you instead of one of the suits. Because those men out there, the ones who keep turning you around at that hatch, they have a problem, and their problem is you. Harris lowered his hands. Me. You and your 6 surviving men and 3 civilian hostages, the captain said. 10 witnesses. 10 people who all know that a woman on a ridge saved their lives with shooting that no ordinary operator could do. The hostages can be managed. They don't know what they saw. They'll be told it was Allied Special Forces, and they'll believe it because they want to. But your men know exactly what they saw. And you, Commander, you climbed a ridge against a direct order from Overlord Actual to go get her, and you carried her onto a helicopter, and you made the medic write her name down, Evelyn Hayes, in an official record, and now that name is a problem that a lot of powerful people would very much like to make disappear. Harris went cold. What are you saying? I'm saying, the captain said carefully, that there is a conversation happening right now. One deck up about how to handle the fact that Griffin Unit's existence was just witnessed by 10 people. And there are men in that conversation who solve problems the easy way, which is to bury the truth so deep that no one who saw it is ever believed to threaten careers, to classify everything, to make it so that if you ever say the name Evelyn Hayes out loud again, you'll be the crazy commander who cracked up after a bad op and started seeing phantom snipers. That's the easy way. That's the way they usually do it. And the hard way, Harris said. The captain almost smiled. The hard way is why I'm here, because I've spent 30 years in the dark parts of this business, and I've watched us throw away good people to protect programs, and I'm tired of it. Evelyn Hayes did the most human thing I've ever seen anyone do in this line of work. She broke the rules to save lives, and the reward she's looking at if the suits get their way is to have her erased even harder than she already was, to be quietly retired into a life that never happened, to be told that her name in that medical record is being deleted, and that the 7 men she saved will be ordered never to speak of her, and that officially, forever, she was never in that valley at all. He leaned forward. Unless what? Harris said. Unless someone with standing, someone with a spotless record and a chest full of credibility and 7 witnesses who'll follow him anywhere decides to make the truth too expensive to bury, the captain said. Unless a decorated SEAL commander stands up and says on the record in front of the right people that his entire team is alive because of Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes, and that he will not be part of erasing her, and that if they try, he'll make noise. The kind of noise that gets Senate committees interested. He sat back. I can't do that. I'm one of the 11. My whole life is keeping these secrets. But you're not one of us, Commander. You're a hero with a story, and heroes with stories are the one thing men like the ones upstairs are genuinely afraid of. Harris sat with that for a long moment. They'll come after me, he said. My career. Yes, the captain said simply. They might. I won't lie to you. This could cost you. Standing up for her could cost you everything you've built. Harris thought about the crevice. He thought about the moment he had recited last words to his men, the moment he had told Porter it wouldn't happen today, with no reason to believe it, and the way a calm voice on the radio had turned that lie into a truth. He thought about Evelyn Hayes lying flat on her back on that ridge, choosing to be the bait, throwing a grenade into 6 men because it was the only way to save herself, and choosing before all of that to throw away 9 years of her life on the chance that 7 strangers might live. She burned everything for us, Harris said quietly. Every rule she had, her whole mission. 9 years of being invisible. She set it all on fire because she couldn't stand to watch us die. He looked up. What kind of man would I be if I wasn't willing to risk a career for a woman who was willing to risk her entire existence for people she'd never even met? The captain looked at him for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly, and something in his tired eyes looked almost like relief. That, he said, is exactly what I hoped you'd say. And it's why I brought you the coffee instead of one of the suits bringing you a non-disclosure agreement. He stood. Here's what's going to happen. In about 2 hours, you're going to be brought up to a room to give your after-action statement. There will be people in that room who want you to tell a clean, simple story. Allied forces, unknown friendly support, identity unconfirmed. They'll make it very easy for you to say those words. And you're going to have a choice, and you want me to say her name. I want you to do what you think is right, and the captain said. That's the only thing I've ever wanted from anybody in this business, and it's the rarest thing there is. But I'll tell you this, Commander. Whatever you decide in that room decides what happens to Evelyn Hayes. If you tell the clean story, she disappears, and she spends whatever's left of her life knowing that the one time she chose to be human, the system pretended it never happened. And if you tell the truth. He paused at the hatch. If you tell the truth, there's a fight, an ugly one. But there's a chance that a woman who spent 9 years not existing finally gets to. He put his hand on the hatch, then stopped. One more thing, he said. She's awake, just barely and not for long, and I am absolutely not supposed to do this. But I've got about a 10-minute window where the right people are looking the other way, and I think the 2 of you have earned 10 minutes. Do you want to see her? Harris was on his feet before the question was finished. The captain led him down a passageway and through a hatch that had been locked to him for 14 hours past a corpsman who very deliberately turned to study a clipboard and into a small compartment where Evelyn Hayes lay surrounded by machines and tubes and monitors, pale as paper. More machine than woman, it seemed, but alive, her chest rising and falling, her eyes open and finding him the moment he stepped through the door. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then her cracked lips curved just slightly into that same ghost of a smile he'd seen on the ridge. Commander Harris, she said, her voice barely a thread, you look terrible. Yeah, Harris said, and he had to stop and clear his throat because it had closed up entirely. Yeah, well, long day. You don't look so hot yourself, Hayes. I've had better, she admitted. Her eyes drifted to the machines, then back to him. The hostages. Alive, Harris said. All 3. Home or on their way. Because of you. She closed her eyes for a moment, and Harris watched something move across her face, some vast, complicated thing, relief and grief and exhaustion all at once. And your kid, she said, the one who got hit, Porter. Harris stared at her. How do you know his name? I've been watching that valley for 11 days, Commander, she said, and there was the ghost of that dry humor again. I know all your names. I've been listening to you talk to each other for hours before you ever got shot down. I knew Coleman was your steady one, and Reyes was your worrier, and Porter was your kid. I knew all of you before I ever fired a shot. Her eyes found his. That's why I couldn't do it. That's why I couldn't just watch. You weren't strangers to me, Harris. I'd been listening to you keep your men alive for 11 days. By the time your bird went down, I already knew you. And I couldn't sit on that ridge and listen to you say goodbye to them. Harris sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed because his legs did not entirely want to hold him. They're telling me you don't exist, he said quietly. There are men out there who want to erase you. Erase your name. Erase what you did. Make it so you were never in that valley at all. I know, she said. That's the deal I signed up for. That's what Griffin means. You do the work and you get nothing, and no one ever knows. I've made my peace with it. I made my peace with it a long time ago. Well, I haven't, Harris said, and I'm not going to. In about 2 hours, they're going to put me in a room and hand me a lie and ask me to sign it, and I'm not going to. I'm going to say your name, Evelyn. I'm going to put it on the record, and I'm going to make it stick, and I don't care what it costs me. You saved 7 men, and you shouldn't have to vanish for it. You should have to exist for it, so I'm going to make you exist. For a long moment, she just looked at him, and her eyes filled, and one tear slid down the side of her face into the pillow, and Harris realized that this woman who had faced 46 men without a flicker of fear was undone, completely undone, by the simple idea that someone was going to refuse to let her disappear. You shouldn't, she whispered. Harris, you shouldn't. They'll destroy you for it. Everything you've built. Please. I'm not worth your career. I've already made my peace with being nothing. Don't burn yourself down for a ghost. And Harris leaned forward and took her hand, the same hand he'd held while her heart stopped in the helicopter, and he held it, and he said the thing he'd been trying to find the words for since the moment on the ridge when she'd opened her eyes and told him she'd said not to come back. You're not a ghost, he said. You're the most real person I've ever met, and I'm real bad at following orders from people who tell me to leave good soldiers behind. You taught me that, up on that ridge. So no, I'm not leaving you behind either. Not in that valley and not in some file cabinet where they bury the people they're ashamed to admit they used. He squeezed her hand. You reached across a whole valley to pull 7 strangers out of the dark. Let somebody do the same for you. Just this once. Let somebody come back for you. And Evelyn Hayes, who had spent 9 years not existing, who had carried a dead teammate on her conscience, for 6 of them who had burned her entire life to the ground, to save men she'd only ever known as voices on a radio, closed her eyes and wept and held on to the hand of the one man in the world who had refused to let her be erased. Out in the passageway somewhere above them, the men in suits were deciding how to make her disappear. And Marcus Harris, holding her hand in that small humming compartment, was quietly deciding that they were going to have to go through him first. They came for him exactly 2 hours later, and going through Harris was precisely what they intended to do. The corpsman knocked on the frame of the ready room where Harris had been sitting alone and said the debrief was ready for him. And Harris stood and squared his shoulders and followed the man up 2 decks and down a passageway to a compartment he had never seen before. A plain gray room with a plain gray table and 4 people already seated around it. And Harris knew before he even sat down that this was not a debrief. This was an ambush. And he had walked into enough of those in the last day to recognize the shape of one. There was a Navy captain he didn't know at the head of the table. There was a woman in a civilian suit with a government lanyard and cold, patient eyes. There was the full Colonel Coleman had warned him about sitting very straight, saying nothing. And there was one of the plain clothes men who had turned Harris away from the hatch, the pleasant one, the one who was so good at telling people that things had never happened. Commander Harris, the pleasant man said, gesturing to the empty chair. Please sit. You've had an extraordinary day. I want to start by saying on behalf of everyone in this room that what you and your team accomplished out there was nothing short of heroic. 3 American hostages home safe. 7 of your 8 men home safe. That's a story this country needs. That's the kind of story that reminds people why we do what we do. 7 of 8, Harris said, sitting. Whitfield died in the crash, and Chief Whitfield will be honored, the pleasant man said smoothly. His family will be taken care of. His sacrifice will not be forgotten. He slid a folder across the table. This is your after-action report. We've taken the liberty of preparing a draft to save you the trouble, given everything you've been through. I'd ask you to read it over, and if it reflects your recollection, sign at the bottom, and then you can go get some real sleep. You've earned it. Harris did not touch the folder. Read it to me, Lieutenant, he said. The pleasant man's smile did not waver. It's fairly standard, Commander. It documents the insertion, the ambush, the loss of the aircraft, your team's defensive stand, and the successful recovery of the hostages during a period in which enemy forces became disorganized, allowing your team to break out and complete the mission. Disorganized how? Harris said. Enemy forces sustained significant casualties from an unknown source. The pleasant man said, still smooth, still pleasant. Possibly allied special operations elements operating independently in the area. Identity unconfirmed. Support unconfirmed. The report notes that friendly fire from an unidentified source contributed to the enemy's collapse and that your team capitalized on the confusion. It's accurate, Commander. It's just clean. It's a lie, Harris said. The temperature in this room dropped. The woman in the suit set down her pen. The colonel, who had not moved now very slightly, turning his head to look at Harris directly for the first time. I'd choose that word carefully, Commander, the pleasant man said. And the pleasantness was still there, but there was something underneath it now, cold and hard as a stone under a thin layer of snow. Nothing in that report is untrue. Enemy forces were eliminated by an unidentified source. That's a fact. Their identity is unconfirmed. That's also a fact from an official standpoint. Everything in that document is technically, legally, and administratively accurate. Her name is Evelyn Hayes, Harris said. Silence. I don't know who you're referring to, the pleasant man said. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes, Harris said, and he said it slowly and he said it loud. And he watched the woman in the suit flinch, and he watched the colonel's jaw tighten, and he knew he'd hit something. United States Navy, 16 years of service. She spent the last hour of that battle eliminating enemy fighters at extreme range to keep my team alive. She got on our net, and she walked us out of a kill box turn by turn. She took 6 enemy fighters off a ridge by herself wounded, and she flatlined 3 times on the table in this ship's surgical suite about 8 hours ago. And she is alive right now, 1 deck down, because I climbed a ridge against a direct order to go get her. That is what happened out there, and I'm not going to sign a piece of paper that says it didn't. The pleasant man leaned back in his chair. Commander, he said quietly, you've been through a tremendous ordeal, 62 minutes without comms, watching your men wounded, losing Chief Whitfield. Under that kind of stress, the mind does remarkable things. It fills in gaps. It creates patterns. It's entirely understandable that you might have constructed a narrative, a comforting one, to explain how your team survived odds that, frankly, you should not have survived. A guardian angel on the ridge, a voice on the radio. It's a beautiful story, but there was no Evelyn Hayes in that valley because there is no Evelyn Hayes anywhere. We've checked. There's no such officer on active duty, and I would strongly advise you not to build your career's most important report around a person the United States Navy has no record of. And there it was, the whole machine laid out on the table. Not a threat, not yet, just a door held open, a door marked easy, and a quiet suggestion that the only alternative was to be the commander who cracked, who hallucinated a phantom sniper, who lost his mind in a valley and never quite got it back. Harris looked at each of them in turn. You checked, he said. You checked, and there's no Evelyn Hayes. Funny thing, when we brought her aboard, the medic radioed her name to the trauma team, and the trauma team spent the next 4 hours cutting bullets out of a woman who doesn't exist. There are surgeons on this ship right now with her blood dried under their fingernails. There's a corpsman guarding a compartment that officially contains nothing. You want to tell me all of them are hallucinating too? You want to tell me my 6 surviving men, every one of whom heard her voice on the net, every one of whom watched enemy fighters drop from a ridge no enemy could reach, are all suffering the same convenient breakdown? He leaned forward. I've got 10 witnesses. 10. And you're going to sit there and tell me I imagined her. The woman in the suit spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet and precise. Commander Harris, let me be direct with you, because I think you're a direct man and you'll respect it. There are things that this country does that keep it safe, and those things only work if they remain invisible, not classified. Invisible. There is a difference, and it's a difference measured in human lives. The moment a certain kind of program is acknowledged to exist even once, even to a Senate committee behind closed doors, it begins to die, and when it dies, the invisible protection it provides dies with it, and people, real people, American people, start to be exposed to threats they never even knew were being held back. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I'm telling you that this is bigger than one operator's recognition. This is bigger than what's fair. Sometimes the fair thing and the right thing are not the same thing, and people who do this work for a living have to live in that gap every single day. She lived in that gap for 9 years, Harris said. She watched a teammate die once holding her position because the mission mattered more than one man. She carried that for 6 years. And then she watched my team about to die, and she decided that this time, just this one time, she wasn't going to hold her position. She decided a human life mattered more than the invisible thing. She made the exact choice you're telling me I shouldn't make. And now you want me to complete the erasure. You want me to be the last person who could have said she was real and choose to say she wasn't. He shook his head slowly. No, I won't do it. You can classify what she did. Fine. Seal it. Lock it in a vault. I'll never say the word Griffin out loud again in my life. But her name goes in the record. She existed. She was there. That's the line. That's where I stop. The colonel spoke for the first time. His voice was low and even, and there was no pleasantness in it at all. None of the woman's careful reason, just the flat authority of a man who was used to ending conversations. Commander, he said, I'm going to explain your situation to you because I don't think you fully understand it, and I'd hate for you to make a career-ending decision out of ignorance. He folded his hands on the table. Right now, you are a hero. Your team is alive. Your record is spotless. In 6 weeks, you'll be standing in front of cameras, or your men will, or the hostages will, and the country will love you, and your career will accelerate. And everything you've worked 18 years to build will be within reach. That is the road in front of you if you sign that report. Now, here is the other road. If you refuse, if you insist on making an issue of this, if you start saying a name that officially belongs to no one, then a few things happen. First, your report gets flagged for psychological review. That's automatic when a commanding officer makes claims that conflict with all available records. Second, that review becomes part of your file permanently, and the phrase that goes in it is something like unresolved stress reaction with confabulation, and every promotion board for the rest of your career reads it before they read anything else. Third, your men, those loyal men who will follow you anywhere, get pulled in one by one and asked to confirm or deny your account, and they get the same choice you're getting right now. And Commander, do you really want to make Petty Officer Reyes choose between his career and backing up a story about a woman the Navy says doesn't exist? Do you want to do that to Coleman, to Porter when he wakes up? You'd be handing each of them the same grenade you're holding and asking them to hold it too. Harris felt the trap close, and he understood finally and completely exactly how these men operated. They didn't threaten you directly. They threatened the people you loved. They made your integrity into a weapon aimed at your own team. He was quiet for a long moment. You're good at this, he said finally. I'll give you that. You found the one thing that would actually work on me. My men. He looked at the colonel. You're betting that I'll fold to protect them. And you're almost right. Almost. Commander, the colonel began. But you made one mistake, Harris said, and something in his voice made the colonel stop. You assumed I hadn't already talked to them. The room went very still. See, while I was sitting in that ready room for 14 hours, Harris said, waiting to find out if the woman who saved my life was going to live, I had a lot of time, and I spent some of it talking to my men. All of them. Coleman in the passageway, Reyes at Porter's bedside. I even wrote it down what each of them saw in their own words before any of you got to them, before you could offer them their own clean little folders to sign. 6 sworn statements, 6 operators describing the same woman, the same voice, the same shooting, the same rescue in 6 different handwritings, all dated in time before this meeting. And I gave those statements to someone who isn't in this room, someone who told me that the hard way is why he came to me with a cup of coffee instead of a non-disclosure agreement. He watched the colonel's face change. You know exactly who I mean. The pleasant man and the woman in the suit exchanged a glance. The colonel's jaw worked. You don't have the authority to... The colonel started. You're right, Harris said. Yeah, I don't. I'm just a commander. I don't have the authority to declassify anything or to protect anyone or to fight a program that 11 people in the world know exists. I know that. I'm not stupid. I know that if this comes down to my word against the machine wins every single time. I know that. He leaned forward, and now it was his turn to be quiet and precise. But here's what I do have the authority to do. I have the authority to refuse to lie. That's it. That's the only card I hold. I can't make you honor her. I can't make you acknowledge her. But I can refuse personally, individually, to be the instrument of erasing her. And you can review my psychology and flag my file and slow my career to a crawl, and I will still every single day know that when they handed me the pen, I didn't sign. And someday when this is all declassified 30 years from now, 40 when it finally comes out, there's going to be one report in the pile that told the truth. One. And it's going to have my name on it. And that's worth more to me than your cameras and your promotions because I already got the only thing I wanted out of that valley. I got my men home. Everything after that is just paperwork, and I don't sign lies. Nobody said anything for a long time. Then the door opened and the captain walked in. The tired one. The one who had brought Harris coffee. The one who had said his name didn't matter and who now apparently mattered a great deal. Because when he walked in, the colonel stood up and the woman in the suit sat up straighter, and even the pleasant man lost his pleasant expression for just a moment. "Sir," the colonel said, "this is a closed." "I know exactly what this is," the captain said, and he did not raise his voice, but the room reorganized itself around him anyway. "I've been listening to it, and I've heard enough. Colonel, you can sit down. Ms. Reeves, you can put your pen away. And you," he said to the pleasant man, "can take that folder off the table because Commander Harris is not going to be signing it, and I'm going to explain why, and then we're all going to be adults about this." He pulled out a chair and sat unhurried and set his own folder on the table, and Harris saw that it was thicker than the one they'd tried to make him sign. "For 9 years," the captain said, "we have run a program on the principle that the people in it disappear. They do the work and they get nothing and the country stays safe, and that trade was worth it because the people who signed up for it understood it and accepted it. Evelyn Hayes understood it better than anyone. She accepted it more completely than anyone. She held her position while a friend died because that was the deal." He looked around the table. "And that right there is exactly why we cannot do this to her now. Because she is the one person who most fully embraced being nothing. And she is the one person who, given a choice between her mission and 7 strangers' lives, chose the lives. She is the best of what we built and the most human both at once. And if the reward we give her for finally, after 9 years, doing the most decent thing a person can do is to erase her even harder than before, then we don't deserve the program. We don't deserve any of them, and I won't be part of it." "Sir," the woman in the suit said carefully, "the exposure risk is manageable," the captain cut in. "I've spent the last 2 hours making it manageable. The hostages get the Allied forces story, and they'll never know otherwise, and that holds. The enemy commander we've been watching for 2 years is dead, so the observation mission's value died with him anyway, which means Hayes didn't burn an active operation. She ended a completed one early. And Commander Harris and his men get a classified addendum, sealed eyes only. That acknowledges Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes by name, credits her with the actions that saved Bravo 9, and enters her conduct into a record that exists, that is real, that is simply locked away until a day comes when it can be opened. She doesn't get her parade. She doesn't get her medal in the sunlight, but she stops being nothing. She becomes something that exists in the dark, waiting for the light. And Commander Harris signs that because that's the truth. And the truth is the only thing this man was ever willing to sign." He slid his thicker folder across the table to Harris. "Read it," the captain said. "Every word. And if it tells the truth, sign it. And if it doesn't tell me what's wrong, and I'll fix it because I am done, personally done, watching us throw away the best people we have to protect our own comfort." Harris opened the folder. He read it. He read every word slowly with the colonel and the woman and the pleasant man all watching him, and as he read, his throat tightened because it was all there. The valley, the trap, the crevice, the voice on the net, the impossible shots, the route out, the hostages, the ridge, and her name over and over, Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes credited. Real, entered into the permanent record of the United States Navy, sealed but undeniable. A truth waiting patiently in the dark. For the day it would be allowed to become a legend. Harris picked up the pen. He looked up at the captain. "You said the hard way is why you came to me with coffee," he said. "I want you to know something. When I was in that crevice before she ever fired a shot, I told my youngest man that we were both getting out of that valley. I had no reason to believe it. I just knew it. And I want to think that some part of me knew even then that the world doesn't actually let good people die that easy, that somebody always comes. On the ridge for us, it was her. Here for her, it's you. He signed his name slow and firm and permanent at the bottom of the truth. Somebody always comes back. That's the only thing I believe in anymore. The captain took the folder and closed it, and for the first time since Harris had met him, the tired eyes weren't tired. Somebody always comes back, the captain repeated quietly. I'm going to hold on to that one, Commander. He stood. Now, there's someone one deck down who's been asking whether you signed their death certificate or their birth certificate. I think you should be the one to tell her which. And Harris stood, and he walked out of that gray room past the colonel who would not meet his eyes, and the woman who was already reaching for her phone, and the pleasant man who for the first time all day had nothing pleasant to say, and he went down one deck to a small humming compartment to tell a woman who had spent 9 years not existing that the record now said in ink forever that she was real. Which one it was, Harris got to tell her himself. He came through the hatch of that small compartment, and Evelyn Hayes turned her head on the pillow to look at him, and he saw the question sitting in her eyes before she said a single word, saw the way she was already bracing herself for the answer she had spent 9 years expecting. Well, she said quietly, did you sign it, Commander? The clean story. Tell me you signed it. Tell me you didn't burn yourself down for me. Harris pulled the chair up beside her bed and sat, and he took his time because he wanted to remember her face when he said it. I signed something, he said, just not what they wanted me to sign. Her jaw tightened, and there was fear in it, real fear, the kind he had never once heard in her voice across all those minutes on the radio. Harris, tell me you didn't. Your name's in the record, Evelyn, he said, in ink, permanent. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes, credited by name with saving Bravo 9. It's sealed, it's classified. Nobody's going to be reading it at any parade. But it exists, you exist. In the official history of the United States Navy, there is now a document that says you were there, that you were real, and that 7 men are breathing today because of you. And nobody, not the colonel, not the woman in the suit, not any of them, is ever going to be able to erase it. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just stared at him, and Harris watched 9 years of certainty crack apart behind her eyes. 9 years of believing that the deal was the deal, that she would do the work and get nothing and vanish, and he watched that belief lose to something it had never once had to compete with before. That's not possible, she whispered. They don't do that. They never do that. I watched them not do it for 9 years. They did it today, Harris said. There's a captain who decided he was done watching good people get thrown away. And there was a commander who wouldn't sign a lie no matter what it cost him. And between the two of us, we made it too expensive to erase you. He leaned forward. You're not nothing anymore, Evelyn. You stopped being nothing about 20 minutes ago in a gray room 2 decks up, and there is not one thing in this world those men can do about it now. And Evelyn Hayes, who had faced down 46 enemies without a flicker, who had thrown a grenade into 6 men at point-blank range, and lived, who had flatlined 3 times on a surgical table, and come back 3 times, put her hand over her face and wept. And this time Harris did not look away because some tears a person has earned the right to cry in front of a witness. When she could speak again, she lowered her hand and her eyes were red, but there was something in them Harris hadn't seen before, something that looked almost like a person coming back to life from a long way down. Your career, she said. The colonel. He's going to do whatever he does, Harris said. Maybe my promotions slow down. Maybe some board reads a note in my file and passes me over. I've made my peace with it, same way you made your peace with disappearing. He almost smiled. And you know what I found out? It turns out the version of me that wouldn't sign that lie is the only version of me I actually want to be. You did that, up on that ridge. You showed me what it looks like when somebody throws everything away to do the decent thing. I just tried to be worth the example. You barely knew me, she said. You still barely know me. You risked everything you built for a stranger on a radio. So did you, Harris said. 7 of them. So we're even. Now stop arguing with me. You're supposed to be resting. That got a laugh out of her, weak and wet, but real, and it was the first time Harris had ever heard her laugh, and he decided in that moment that he was going to make it his business to hear it again. The recovery took months, and Harris was not there for most of it. The Navy did what the Navy does and scattered Bravo 9 to hospitals and homes and eventually back to duty, and Harris himself was pulled into the slow grinding machinery of debriefs and reviews and the quiet, deliberate stalling of a career by men who never once said out loud what they were doing. But he made it his business to know how she was. He owed her that much. He owed her more than that, more than he could ever put a number on, and knowing was the least of it. He learned in pieces through the tired captain who somehow always seemed to have a way of reaching him when it mattered that Evelyn Hayes was healing, and that it was slow, and that it was hard. The blood loss had done damage. There was a long stretch, weeks of it, where the doctors were not sure she would ever have full use of her right hand again. And for a sniper, Harris understood that was its own kind of death sentence, worse in some ways than the wound itself. He found out later that she had spent those weeks in a quiet, controlled fury doing hand exercises past the point of pain, past the point where the therapist told her to stop, doing them until her fingers cramped and bled and shook. Because the one thing Evelyn Hayes would not accept, the one outcome she refused, was being taken out of the fight forever by the very rescue she had chosen to give. Harris understood that too. He understood it completely. It was the same stubbornness that had made her pick up the rifle in the first place. You do not spend 9 years becoming the best there is at something and then let it be taken from you without a war. 2 months after the Valley Porter wrote him a letter. The kid was walking again by then, the bullet in his flank long since removed, and the letter was 3 pages of a young man trying to say something too big for the words he had, and Harris read it standing up in his kitchen and had to sit down halfway through. Porter thanked him for the crevice, for the order that he was not allowed to die that day for carrying him up the goat trail. And then near the end, Porter asked the question that Harris had not been able to answer for 2 months. "The lady on the radio," Porter wrote, "the one who saved us. Is she okay, sir? I think about her every single day. I don't even know her name, and I think about her every day. Please tell me she made it, sir." Harris folded the letter and put it in his pocket and carried it around for a week because for the first time he could answer it. He just had to wait for the day he could do it in person. That day came 6 months after the Valley. He got a message with no name attached to it, routed through channels that were not supposed to exist. It contained only a time, a date, and a place. A diner. A small town 3 states away, a town Harris had never heard of and would never have had a reason to visit. He went. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall, the way operators always sit, and for a second he almost didn't recognize her. He had only ever seen her at the edge of death, pale and broken, and wired to machines, a voice attached to a body that was fighting to keep breathing. Now she was just a woman in a booth in a diner, in a plain jacket, drinking coffee like anybody else. And she looked up when the bell over the door rang, and she smiled. And it was a whole smile this time, not a ghost of one. "Commander," she said. "It's just Harris now," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Or Marcus, if you can stand it. I'm not sure I'm commander material anymore. My file's got a very interesting note in it these days." "I heard," she said, "I heard you got passed over for '06. First time in your career you didn't make a board." "First of a few, I'm told," Harris said with a shrug. "The colonel keeps his promises." He picked up the menu, set it down without reading it. "Funny thing, I thought it would eat at me. 18 years of wanting that next stripe, and I finally don't get it, and I keep waiting to feel angry about it, and the anger just never shows up. Turns out doing the right thing keeps you warmer at night than a promotion does. Who knew?" She studied him for a moment over her coffee, and there was something searching in it, something that had clearly been sitting in her for 6 months. "You could have signed the clean story," she said quietly. "You know that. You could have signed it and made your board and made your rank, and nobody in the whole world would have blamed you. Nobody would have even known there was a choice to make. I'd have disappeared, and you'd have been a colonel, and everyone would have called it a happy ending." She set the cup down. "I've thought about that a lot these 6 months, lying in that bed with nothing to do but think. Why you did it. And I couldn't make it add up. It's not rational, Harris. You had everything and you gambled all of it for something you couldn't touch. For a name on a page, for me. And I couldn't figure out why." "You want to know why I did it?" Harris said. "I do. I need to. I've needed to for 6 months. Because you did it first," he said simply. "You had everything too, Evelyn. 9 years of being the perfect ghost. A career in the dark, but a career you were the best in the world at. A mission 2 years in the making. And you had discipline that most people can't even imagine, the kind of discipline that lets you watch a friend die once because your order said hold. You had all of it. And you set every bit of it on fire in about 10 seconds. Because you could not sit on a ridge and listen to a bunch of strangers say goodbye to each other. He met her eyes across the table. You want to know why I wouldn't sign that lie? Because I had just watched a woman throw away 9 years of her life for 7 voices on a radio. And if I'd signed that lie to protect my career, I'd have been a smaller man than the person I just watched save my entire team. And I wasn't willing to be that small. Not after you. You raised the bar. I just refused to walk under it. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She turned her coffee cup slowly in its saucer, and Harris let her have the silence because he had learned that she used silence the way other people used words. Then she said, the teammate 6 years ago, did they tell you about him? They told me some, Harris said carefully. The captain, he said you had the shot that could have saved him, and your order said hold. And you held, and you watched him die, and you carried it every single day for 6 years. She nodded slowly, still looking down into the cup. His name was Danny, she said, and for 6 years I told myself I did the right thing, that the mission mattered more than one man. That's what they train into you in Griffin, deeper than they train anything else. The mission is everything. One life is nothing against the mission. And I believed it. I needed to believe it because if it wasn't true, then I let my best friend die for nothing, and I couldn't live inside that. So I believed the lie. I built my whole self on it. She looked up, and her eyes were wet again, but her voice was steady. And then your bird went down, and I watched it start to happen all over again right in front of me. 7 Dannys this time, pinned in a hole, doing the math, running out of everything. And something in me just stopped. In 1 second, 1 single second, I stopped believing that any mission on Earth is worth more than 7 men bleeding out in the rocks. And I picked up my rifle. And Harris, do you know what I found out when I did? What? Harris said quietly. I found out I'd been wrong for 6 years, she said, and her voice finally broke, and she let it break right there in a diner booth in the middle of nowhere. The mission was never worth more than Danny. I could have saved him. I should have saved him. Everything they trained into me, the whole beautiful philosophy of it was just a lie I told myself so I could survive the guilt of holding my position while my friend died 20 feet away. And the second I let go of that lie and picked up my rifle for your team, 6 years of carrying Danny just lifted off me. Just like that. Because I finally did for you what I couldn't make myself do for him. I finally chose the person over the mission. And it turned out that was who I was supposed to be the whole time. Harris reached across the table and put his hand over hers. The right one. The one the doctors weren't sure would ever work again. And he felt her grip it back, firm and sure and strong. Hand works fine, he observed. Hand works fine, she confirmed, and there was steel under the wet in her voice. I made absolutely sure of it. I wasn't going to let them take that too. You think you saved my team, Harris said. And you did. But I want you to hear something, and I want you to actually hear it, not just nod. My team saved you right back. Every one of us. Because we were the thing that finally let you put Danny down. You've been thanking me in your head for 6 months for making you exist on paper. But you were the one who was already dead inside carrying a ghost for 6 years, and my 7 men gave you a way to bury him. So don't you dare sit there and think you owe me. We're even. We've been even since the moment you keyed that mic. She looked at him for a long time. Then very quietly she said, You're a good man, Marcus Harris. I learned from the best, he said. Now, before I forget. He pulled Porter's letter out of his jacket, worn soft at the folds from 6 months of being carried, and he set it on the table between them. This is from Porter, the kid, the one who got hit in the crevice. He's walking again. Bullet came out clean, missed everything that mattered by ½ an inch, just like they said. He tapped the letter. He wrote me 2 months ago, asked me a question I couldn't answer until today. He wanted to know if the lady on the radio made it, said he thinks about her every single day, doesn't even know your name, and he thinks about you every day. Harris's voice thickened. I'm going to write him back tonight, Evelyn. And for the first time, I get to tell him, yes, the lady on the radio made it. She's okay. She's better than okay. And Evelyn Hayes picked up that letter with a hand that wasn't supposed to work anymore, and she read 3 pages of a young man's clumsy, desperate gratitude. And by the end of it, she was crying so hard she couldn't see the words. And Harris signaled the waitress for more coffee and gave her the time she needed because there are some things a person has to feel all the way through before they can carry them. Tell him, she finally managed. Tell him the lady on the radio thinks about him too. Tell him I heard him laugh in that crevice when you gave him an order not to die. Tell him that laugh is one of the reasons I picked up my rifle. Because anybody who can laugh in a hole like that deserves to grow old. She pressed the letter to her chest for a moment, then folded it with great care and handed it back. Tell him that, word for word. I will, Harris said, word for word. And they talked for 2 hours in that diner, about the valley, about Danny, about the tired captain who Evelyn said had visited her twice in the hospital and never given her his name either, and who she had come to understand was the only reason any of them had made it out of that gray room with the truth intact. They talked about Coleman, who had told everyone who would listen that he still owed the ghost sniper a drink and intended to pay up someday. They talked about Reyes and Novak and Diaz, and about Whitfield, who had died in the crash and never seen how it ended, and they were both quiet for a while over Whitfield because some losses don't get made right, they just get carried. And then near the end, over the last cold inch of coffee, she told him she was going back. Harris set his cup down. Back where? Griffin, she said. They cleared to me for full duty last week. Full duty Harris, hand and all. And they want me back. And I said yes. He looked at her for a long moment, and something protective and angry rose in his chest before he could stop it. After everything they did, after they tried to erase you, tried to make you into a hallucination, tried to make me sign a paper that said you were never even there. You want to go back and work for those about they Not for them, she said, for the work. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference. She leaned forward. Somebody has to sit on the ridge and watch Marcus. Somebody has to be the eyes in the dark that keep the light safe. It's ugly work, and it's lonely work, and it eats people alive. And I'd rather it be done by someone who's learned the one thing that program will never teach you. The one thing they trained out of me that I had to almost die to get back. And what's that, Harris said. That there's a line, she said, that the mission is not in fact worth more than everything. That there are moments, rare ones but real ones, when you put down the orders and you pick up the rifle and you save the people in front of you and you let the whole world do whatever it wants to you afterward. She turned her coffee cup one last time. I know where that line is now. I paid for it. Danny paid for it, God rest him. Your whole team paid for it. And now I get to be the ghost on the ridge who actually understands that when it truly counts, when there's no other way and no one is coming, and the math says everybody dies, you break protocol and you save the ones you can. That's worth going back for. That's worth being nothing again for. Because now I know that being nothing was never the price. The price was forgetting where the line was, and I'll never forget again. Harris was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly because he understood, and because arguing with her would have been like arguing with the tide. Don't disappear on me, he said. I fought too hard to make you exist. I gave up a stripe for it. You disappearing would make me feel like I overpaid. She smiled, and it was that same dry humor he had first heard on a ridge in the worst hour of his life. I won't disappear. You know where to find me now, and I always know where to find you. She stood gathering her jacket. I've been watching people for a living for 9 years, Commander. You're not hard to keep track of. You never were. In the parking lot before she left, he pulled her into a hard embrace, and she let him, and for just a second the sniper and the commander held on to each other, two people who had reached across impossible distances to pull each other out of the dark, neither of them entirely sure who had saved whom. Thank you, Harris said into her ear, for not holding your position. And she pulled back and wiped her eyes one last time and said, thank you for coming back up that ridge. Nobody ever came back for me before. Then she got in her car and she drove away, and Harris stood in that parking lot and watched until she was gone. And then he drove home and wrote Porter a letter that made the kid cry 2 states away, and life went on. The note in Harris's file did exactly what the colonel had promised it would do. He was passed over a second time and a third, and eventually he retired a commander when he might have retired an admiral, and he found to his own quiet and lasting surprise that he genuinely did not care. He had made his choice in that gray room, and he had never once wished he had chosen differently. And there are not many men who can say that about the hardest decision of their lives. But the story did not retire when Harris did. That was the thing about the truth, the thing he came to understand slowly over the years that followed. You could seal it, you could classify it, you could lock it in a vault a mile underground and post a guard at the door. But you could not stop men from remembering, and you could not stop them from whispering. And a thing that is whispered long enough by enough good men becomes something no vault on earth can ever quite contain. It started with Bravo 9. The 6 of them scattered across the fleet, and each of them told the story exactly once to one person they trusted in a bar or a barracks or a quiet moment in the belly of a ship before a bad deployment. And they kept their word about the sealed record, every one of them. They never used her real name, but they told the shape of it. A team surrounded, 46 against 8. A last stand in a crevice with the last words already spoken and the last magazine already loaded. And then a single impossible shot from a ridge no one could see, and a calm woman's voice on a jammed radio walking dead men back into the land of the living. And the person they told one person, and that person told one more. 6 months became a year. A year became 5. And somewhere in that stretch of time, the story stopped being a thing that happened to a specific team in a specific valley and became something larger, something that operators told each other in the darkest hours before the worst missions. A story men reached for when they were scared. A story about how sometimes when you are surrounded and outnumbered and certain you are going to die, when the math says there is no way out and no one is coming and the radio is nothing but static, someone impossible appears on the high ground and turns your ending into a beginning. They called her different things in different tellings. The ghost on the ridge, the angel of the valley, the woman who doesn't exist. Some men swore up and down she was real, and some swore she was only a legend, a story to keep the fear at bay, and some swore she was both at once, in the beauty of it, the thing that would have made those men in the gray room furious if they had ever understood it was this. In trying to erase her, they had made her immortal. They had classified the fact of her, sealed it away, and so the myth of her had grown to fill the exact space where the fact should have been. And now there was no vault deep enough, no classification high enough, no order stern enough to hold it. You cannot bury a legend. It only grows in the dark. Harris heard the whispers himself years after he had hung up the uniform, sitting in the back of a room where he had been invited to speak to young operators who had no idea who he was. He listened to a kid barely older than Porter had been tell the legend of the ghost sniper to a rapt circle of his peers, tell it wrong in half the details and exactly right in the one detail that mattered. And Harris sat in the back and said nothing and smiled into his coffee. Because he knew. He was the only man in that room who knew. And he understood in that moment that some truths are more powerful as whispers than they could ever be as headlines. She would never get her parade, but she would get something better. She would get forever. And he knew something else too. Sitting in the back of that room, something he could not have proven and did not need to. He knew that somewhere out there, right at that very moment, Evelyn Hayes was on a ridge. He knew it the way he had known in the crevice with his last magazine loaded and his last words already spoken, that he and Porter were both going to make it out alive, not with proof, not with evidence, just with the bone-deep certainty of a man who had learned the hardest way there is, that the world does not let good people die as easily as the arithmetic insists it should. Somewhere there was a convoy pinned down on a bad road, or a team surrounded in a valley, or a young operator in a hole in the rock, spending what he was absolutely certain were the last minutes of his life. And somewhere above them on high ground, they would never think to look at, there was a woman with her cheek against a rifle reading the wind, reading the distance, reading the whole battlefield, the way most people read a single line of a book. A woman who had learned the hard way exactly where the line was. A woman who knew all the way down to the marrow of her that when it really counted, when there was no other way, you put down the orders and you picked up the rifle and you saved the ones you could and you let the world do whatever it wanted to you afterward. Because being able to make that choice and make it right was worth more than any mission, any career, any rank, any medal, any parade in the sunlight. She had bought that knowledge with 6 years of grief and 3 deaths on an operating table, and she would never sell it back. And in that moment, wherever she was, whatever pinned down and hopeless team was about to learn, they were not nearly as alone as they believed. Evelyn Hayes would settle in behind her rifle and breathe out slow. and let the calm come over her the way it always did, the deep and terrible calm that had unmade 46 men in a valley years before. She would whisper 2 words to herself, the same 2 words she always whispered, the only prayer she had left and the only one she needed. Time to work, and she would pull the trigger. And somewhere below her, men who were certain they were done for would suddenly impossibly have a chance. They would hear that first flat crack roll down from the high ground, late and distant, and final the death arriving, before the sound the way it always did, and they would look at each other with, well, disbelieving hope, and one of them would say the words that Harris had heard whispered in briefing rooms for the rest of his life, the whole legend distilled down to a single ragged breath. She's real. She came for us. We're going to make it, because somebody always comes back. Harris had staked his career on that truth and lost the stripes and never once regretted it. Evelyn Hayes had staked her very soul on it and won back 6 years of her life. And neither of them, not once in all the years that followed, was ever proven wrong. When you are surrounded, when you are outnumbered, when the last radio call has gone out and the last round is in the chamber, and every cold rule of arithmetic says you are already a dead man, there is still one thing the arithmetic can never account for. One variable no enemy can plan for and no kill box can ever contain. The chance that somewhere on the high ground above you, watching, waiting, is a ghost who decided a long time ago that she would rather burn down the whole world than sit still one more time and listen to good people say goodbye. She was real. She was always real. And she is out there right now on a ridge, watching over someone who does not yet know they are about to be saved. That is not a legend. That is the truth they tried to bury, and the truth came home. Years later, on a cold gray morning at a naval hospital that officially did not treat anyone by the name of Evelyn Hayes, a nurse walked into a private room and found an old man already sitting in the chair beside the bed, and she did not ask how he had gotten in, because men like him did not come in through doors that other people used. Marcus Harris was 71 now. His hair had gone white and his knees had gone bad, and the stripes he'd never earned had long since stopped mattering to anyone but the men who understood why he'd never earned them. He sat with his hat in his hands and he watched the woman in the bed breathe, and the machines around her breathe with her, and he had been sitting there since before dawn. Evelyn Hayes was 68. She had spent the last several months losing a war that no rifle could win, the slow kind, the kind that comes for everyone. Eventually, no matter how many impossible shots they've made. And when the tired old captain, older now than Harris had ever imagined a person could get, had called him 3 days ago with a number and a room and the words, "She's asking for you," Harris had been on the road within the hour. "You came," she said without opening her eyes. Her voice was a thread, but it was steady, and it was hers. "I fought too hard to make you exist," Harris said. "Wasn't going to let you slip out the back door without me." Her eyes opened and they found him. And even now, even here, there was that ghost of dry humor in them that he had first heard on a radio in the worst hour of his life. "You look terrible, Commander," she said. "You always say that," Harris said, and his throat closed and he had to stop and clear it. "Every time, 40 years, and it's the first thing out of your mouth. Somebody has to keep you honest," she said. She reached for his hand and he took it. The right one, the one the doctors had said would never work again, and had worked for 4 more decades, and he felt her grip, it back weaker now, but still there, still sure. "Marcus, I have to tell you something, while I still can, and I need you to just listen and not argue the way you never once managed to do the entire time I've known you." "I'll try," Harris said. "You won't," she said, "but I love you for trying." She took a slow breath, and the machines counted it for her. "Do you remember in the diner all those years ago you told me my team saved me right back? That your 7 men gave me away to bury Danny?" "I remember." "You were right," she said, "but you were only half right, and I've spent 40 years trying to figure out how to tell you the other half." Her eyes held his. "You didn't just help me bury Danny, Marcus. You did something I didn't have a word for until I was old enough to understand it. You came back. That's the whole thing. That's the whole secret. Nobody in my entire life, in that entire program, in all those years of being a ghost, ever came back for me. Not once. I was the one who came back for other people always, and then I disappeared, and that was the deal. And I told myself I'd made my peace with it. And then a stubborn SEAL commander climbed a ridge against a direct order because he refused to leave a stranger behind." Her voice cracked. You taught me that people come back. That's what I spent the rest of my life believing. Every ridge I ever sat on after that valley, every team I ever watched over. I did it because you proved to me that somebody comes back. You made that real for me. You made it something I could carry up onto the high ground and hand to men who'd stopped believing it. Harris couldn't speak. He just held her hand. There's something you don't know, she said. Something I never told you. The captain knows, but I made him swear he'd let me be the one to tell you, and I kept putting it off because I'm a coward about exactly one thing in this world, and it's the things that matter most. She squeezed his hand. After the valley, after I went back to Griffin, you know how many teams I pulled out of the fire over the years. You've heard the whispers, the convoy in the wadi, the team on the mountain, the extraction that everyone said was impossible. All of them. All those ghost sniper legends the young ones tell each other in the dark. I've heard them all, Harris said. I always knew it was you. 63, she said. 63 teams, Marcus, over the years. I kept count. I kept count because it mattered to me, every single one. Do you know how many operators that is? Do you know how many men are alive right now, walking around old and gray and holding their grandchildren because I decided one day in a valley that the mission was never worth more than the men? Hundreds, hundreds of them. And every last one of them traces back to a ridge in that valley and a stubborn commander who wouldn't sign a lie and a name in a sealed file that meant I was allowed to keep existing long enough to do it. Her eyes were streaming now and she didn't wipe them. You didn't save 7 men that day, Marcus, because you saved me and I saved them. You saved every single one of them. All those hundreds, every one of those grandchildren. That's what you bought with your stripes. You never got to be an admiral. You got something better. You got hundreds of men home to their families, and you'll never even meet most of them, and they'll never know your name. But they're home because you came back up a ridge for a woman who didn't exist. Harris put his head down on their joined hands and wept the way an old man weeps, quiet and complete. And Evelyn Hayes laid her other hand on his white hair, the way she had once wanted to lay it on a dead friend she couldn't save. And this time the hand landed on someone living, someone she had saved, someone who had saved her back. So here's what I need, she said gently when he had cried himself quiet. I need you to stop mourning that career, once and for all, because it wasn't a sacrifice, Marcus. It was the best investment any man ever made. You traded 3 stripes for hundreds of lives. Any accountant in the world would call that the deal of the century. Promise me you'll stop mourning it. I promise, Harris said muffled, and for once in his life he wasn't arguing. Good, she said. Now sit up. I'm not done and I don't have all the time in the world anymore, so pay attention. He sat up. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, unashamed. There's a young woman, Evelyn said. Petty officer, sniper. She's 29 years old and she's the best natural shot I've ever seen. And I mean the best, better than I was at her age, and I've spent the last 2 years training her quietly off the books, the way these things get passed down. Her name is Reyes. Harris went very still. Reyes. His daughter, Evelyn said, and she smiled at the look on his face. You're Reyes, the worrier, the one who kept his eye on me on that ridge and never blinked. His daughter grew up on a story her father told her exactly once when she was 16 and told him she wanted to enlist. He told her about a woman on a ridge who came when nobody was coming, and she decided at 16 that that was what she wanted to be. She spent her whole life becoming it. Evelyn's grip tightened. I found her 3 years ago. I didn't tell her who I was for the first year. And then one day she looked at me across a range after a shot no one else could have made, and she just knew. And she said, it's you, isn't it? You're the one from my dad's story. And I told her the truth, Marcus. For the first time in my life, I told someone the whole truth about that valley out loud in the sunlight. And she cried. And then she asked me to teach her everything. You have a successor, Harris breathed. I have a successor, Evelyn said. The ghost doesn't die with me. That's the thing I needed you to know before I go. All those years they spent trying to erase me, and here at the end, I get to hand the whole legend to the daughter of one of the men I saved, and she's going to be better than I ever was, and she already understands the one thing that matters. She knows where the line is. I made sure of it before I taught her a single thing about windage or distance. First lesson, before the rifle. The mission is never worth more than the men. Somebody always comes back. She had it before she ever fired a shot for me, because her father gave it to her because you gave it to her father. She laughed softly, a sound like dry leaves in a warm wind. Do you see it, Marcus? Do you see the shape of it? It's a circle. It closed. Everything you did in that gray room, everything you gave up, it didn't just save hundreds of men. It made another one of me. And she'll make another one after her. And that valley, that terrible valley where we were both supposed to die, it's going to keep saving people for 100 years after we're both gone. Harris looked at the woman in the bed, this legend, this ghost, this most real person he had ever known, and he understood finally and completely that he had won, that they both had, that the men in the gray room with all their vaults and all their classifications and all their careful erasures had lost the war so completely they'd never even known there was one, because you cannot bury a thing that has learned how to reproduce itself in the hearts of good people. She's here, Evelyn said. Reyes, she's outside. She's been outside for 2 days. She wanted to give us this. But before I go, Marcus, I want the three of us in this room. I want the man who started it and the woman who carried it and the girl who's going to finish it all in one place one time, so the circle can close where everyone can see it. Her eyes found his one last time, bright and fierce even now. Go get her. That's a request. From one operator to another. Go bring her in. And Harris stood his old knees protesting, and he crossed to the door and he opened it, and there in the hallway stood a young woman in uniform with her back to the wall, the way operators always stand, and she had her father's worried eyes, and when she saw the old man in the doorway, she stood up straight, and something passed between them. Something older than either of them, a story handed down and down and down. Petty Officer Reyes, Harris said, and his voice broke on it. She's asking for you. The young woman's chin trembled once and then held. Yes, sir. You know who I am, Harris said. It wasn't quite a question. You're the commander from the story, she said quietly. You're the one who came back up the ridge. My dad told me. She told me. You're the reason all of us are here, sir. All of us who came after. She looked at him with those worried eyes that were somehow also full of an absolute unbreakable resolve, and Harris saw Evelyn Hayes in them, and he saw the future, and he saw that it was going to be all right. I've wanted to thank you my whole life, sir. My dad came home because of her, and she came home because of you, and I get to exist because of both of you. I don't know how to say thank you for a whole life. I've been standing out here 2 days trying to figure out how. You don't have to, Harris said. You just have to keep coming back. For the ones who think nobody's coming. That's how you say thank you. That's the only way there is. He put his old hand on her shoulder. Now come inside. She wants us all together. There's not much time. And the three of them were in that room together, the man who had refused to sign a lie, the woman who had refused to hold her position, and the girl who would carry both of those refusals forward into a future neither of the older two would live to see. And Evelyn Hayes looked at the two of them, standing side by side, the past and the future, and her worn face broke into the widest and most peaceful smile Harris had ever seen on it. 40 years of grief and guilt and loneliness, finally, completely gone. There it is, she whispered. There's the circle. I got to see it close. She looked at young Reyes. You know what to do when it's your turn. I know what to do, the young woman said, and she was crying, but her voice never wavered. Somebody always comes back. I'll be the somebody, I promise. I'll be the somebody for all of them. That's my girl, Evelyn breathed. That's my good girl. Her eyes moved to Harris one last time, and they were clear and calm, the same calm that had once terrified 46 men in a valley, the calm of a person who has made her peace and has nothing left to fear. Marcus, thank you for coming back for me. Nobody ever did before you. And after you, everybody did. You changed the whole world, and almost nobody will ever know. That's the most heroic thing there is. To change everything and take no credit. You were the best of us. You always were. Go on and rest, Harris said, gently holding her hand. You held the ridge long enough, longer than anybody. You can put the rifle down now, Evelyn. Somebody's got the watch. And Evelyn Hayes looked at the young woman who had her father's eyes and her own steady hands, the girl who would sit on the high ground when she was gone, and she let out one last slow breath, the way she always had before a shot, and the calm came over her one final time. Time to rest, she whispered, and she closed her eyes. The machines went quiet a little while later, gently the way a person hopes to go, and the old man and the young woman stood on either side of the bed in the gray morning light, and neither of them spoke for a long time, because some silences are the only honest words there are. Finally, young Reyes wiped her eyes and squared her shoulders, and she looked across the bed at the old commander, and she said the things she had come to say, the things she would say for the rest of her own life, on ridges all over the world, the thing that had traveled down 40 years and 3 generations to reach her. "I've got the watch now, sir," she said. "You and her, you can stand down. I've got it. And when there's a team out there that thinks nobody's coming." Her jaw set, and in that moment she was every ghost who had ever watched over the hopeless from the high ground. "I'll come. I'll always come. Somebody always comes back." Harris looked at her across the body of the woman who had saved his life and been saved by it, and he saw that the story was not ending. It was only changing hands. And he understood at last that this was the real reason legends cannot be buried. Not because they're whispered, because they are inherited. "Yeah," the old man said, and he smiled through his tears, and it was the smile of a man who has finished a long journey and found at the end of it that everything he gave up had bought exactly what it was supposed to buy. Yeah, somebody always comes back. And somewhere far away on a ridge that no map would ever mark, the wind was already waiting for its next ghost. She was real. She was always real, and now she always would be.